So one of the things I see, for example, in a 6-star business is not so much about business as a means to an end, like pursuing a goal of having a business. It's following a calling. So that's where spirituality and business get to merge, is that you recognize there's a higher purpose for the business that you have and what you're actually doing. So I'm talking about the impact.
Hello, I'm your host, Evelyn Clark, and this is the 6-Star Business Podcast, where we have conversations with amazing, incredible people all about what it takes to be 6-star, going beyond the status quo, doing things differently, and how they bring purpose, love, and impact into their businesses every day. This episode is with Jennifer Regular from Canada, and what a delight it was to speak with her. She goes into all about the essence of us and, well, first of all, her journey, which is just really fascinating to me because she's been involved with social work, counselling, the mind, helping people from all different walks of life, and then moved into the areas of spirituality, which is in effect just the energy of the essence and the soul of the human being. And she brings to light how that connects to our business. And it's an illuminating conversation. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. And this one had me really excited and buzzed. And I'm just really grateful and honored to be able to bring this to you. And yeah, I hope you get a lot out of it, just like I did. Enjoy. This is Jennifer Regular. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is another episode of 6-Star Business Podcast. I'm Evelyn Clark, your host, and today I have the lovely Jennifer Regular with me. How are you, Jennifer?
I am fantastic. I'm so happy to be here. Just feeling thrilled to be sharing.
Oh, wonderful. I'm really happy that you're here too. I just love your smile. What a beautiful smile. Just radiates like this positivity. And it's a Friday morning here. So Fridays always have a different energy, I think, than the rest of the week.
True. Yeah.
So, I think my smile is just as big as yours, but I'm just so happy to see you and thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, I'm so looking forward to getting to know you and sharing your genius and wisdom with our audience. So to get us started, I'd love to ask you a few questions. The first one is the hardest one, which is, where are you in the world?
Planet Earth. Yeah, and the part of planet Earth I'm in is in the west coast of Canada, on British Columbia, Victoria, the capital. Mm-hmm.
Nice. Oh, beautiful. And thank you. It's so lovely that we can connect via technology like this, And
absolutely. Yes.
Every time I have a guest, no matter where they are in the world, I'm always very grateful for technology bringing us together and allowing us to hang out no matter where we are. So thank you.
Me
All
too.
Right.
Yes.
Next questions. So could you tell me, who do you serve? How do you serve them? And then something you like to do when you're not busy serving people.
Good questions. I serve purpose-driven professionals, individuals, I would say, because a lot of them are purpose-driven entrepreneurs, but there's also a lot of people that aren't necessarily an entrepreneur and yet are purpose-driven, and quite often from a very young age. And so I call them natural born leaders. They may not necessarily identify themselves as anyone really special per se, but they have a particular calling and a need for something more in their life. They know that we're here for a higher purpose and are really driven by that, and not always clear on what that purpose is, what their mission is, just that there's something that's pulling them towards something, and spend a good part of their life trying to figure out what that is. Yeah. And so how I'm serving them now, really they tend to be spiritual change makers, wellness advocates, conscious leaders, and helping professionals that are here with a message. So they tend to be speakers and authors. And I like to give them the space and the platform to really come into who they came here to be, to share their message, to share their vulnerabilities, their story, their kind of wake up call that led them to where they are. I mean, my business is called Lighting the Path. So that's essentially what I do. And there's so much in society that dispirits us, that dims our light. And there's all these ideas of who we should be, what expectations we might need to live up to, that gets us in this really confused state where we don't know how to answer the question, who am I? What am I here to do? And so I really enjoy getting together with people who feel that there's something that they're here to deliver. They're willing to do that. They're open to doing that. They may not feel like they're good enough to do that yet. And so I provide the inspiration, support, and resources to help them shine their light and no longer dim it and really step into their spiritual sovereignty, which, Aveline, is really the antidote to imposter syndrome.
There's so much in that, and I am so looking forward to delving in. This is amazing. I love it. So, and what's something you like to do when you're not busy doing all these wonderful things with your change makers?
I love to get outside and be in nature. You know, in British Columbia, we have the mountains, we have the ocean, and we have the forest. We have these beautiful gardens. Victoria is known as the Garden City. And I love being around all that green. The forest is where I love to bathe in, to replenish myself, to open up to the expansiveness and the nurturing of the trees. You know, it just feels like a huge embrace of Mother Earth around me. And I really enjoy that. Sometimes I like more expansion. I need open space because I'm feeling too constricted. So then I'll go out over by the ocean and listen to the waves, or I'll go out into a silent area like a meadow where there's all these gorgeous wildflowers just blooming, and being around animals really lights me up. I talk to the deer in the backyard. I talk to the hummingbirds that come in the front yard, and I just really enjoy animals in nature. So the more time I get to spend with them, the more joy that I get to create.
Yeah, I believe, well, yeah, just from my own journey and experiences, the more that we are in nature and connecting with it, and that includes the animal kingdoms, and is the more grounded we are, the happier we are, and the more in flow we are.
Yeah, and I find the best way to get in touch with our natural rhythms as well, because it's so easy to come out of alignment. And I find that being out in nature really brings me back into alignment.
Ah, wow. I so resonate. I'm fascinated, Jennifer, with obviously what you do. I love what you do. And just here at Six Star, you know, we talk about all elements of Six Star, but it's not about the construct of the business per se only, because it's the individual business owner who needs to be the conduit, the orchestrator, the conductor of their own Six Star business. So it's the individual that we honor, and I'm placing, I guess, more focus on, rather than a separate mechanism of, you know, business, so to speak. There's so many facets to business, and you can deconstruct it and break it down, but really our businesses are reflections of us, certainly those in service-based businesses. And for me, I want to empower people to bring their genius to the world and do it in a way that they can be authentic. And that's part of being Six Star, you know, that authenticity. So what you're talking about and what you're doing, you know, 100% aligns with that, you know, and enables that to happen. So I'm really grateful that we cross paths and you're here to talk to me about this today. So first of all, thank you. And I'm very, very much looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Thank you. I agree with you 100% about the Six Star business and what that actually means and how you described it. Definitely.
Thank you. So would you like to share with me a bit of your journey, or all of it, or whatever you want to do? I'd love to know about what's brought people to where they are today. And, you know, maybe there's some highlights on that journey, or a pivotal point, or something that made you realize this is what I need to be doing. but we've all got that journey, and it's fascinating to learn. Would you like to share that with me?
Absolutely, I can. And it really is a personal evolutionary journey. I mean, a whole journey into authentic empowerment, into self-actualization that is continuous. I'm not there yet either, but I am here, right now. And there's so many things that led up to this. People talk about their past lives. I feel like I've had multiple lives within this one lifetime that's here right now. And we're accelerating at such a rapid pace that even a day can feel like a year now. There's just so much that's happening. And so how it all started for me, there was a few different places. Well, first, I came out of the womb crying. It's like, what is happening? You're in this safe space and there's this whole new world. And there's so much that I wanted to learn and discover about this life and about this world and who's in it and what we're doing here. And it was really early in childhood, actually. It's hard to understand that now, but at the age of 10 is actually when I started writing down notes about what I was observing out in the world, about how people were relating to each other, what was going on. And I started writing that down, and I decided I was going to call it a book, When Society Determines Your Destiny. And there were so many different chapters and thoughts, and just continuously writing down all these notes. I was like this, life researcher or something at this young age, and just trying to take it all in through all of my senses, which could be very overwhelming at times. And years later, I found out it's because I'm an empath and I feel things very deeply. And early on, I didn't really know how to discern whose energy belonged to other people and what belonged to me. So that became part of my healing journey, healing and empowerment, to understand more about our energy and how others' energy and how we're affected by all of that. So at age 10, when I was thinking about how society determines our destiny, I noticed years later in my teens and early 20s, as I was going through university as well, I was always doing this parallel thing. I was doing a study and subject I was very interested in, which, as you might guess, is psychology, behavior and thinking and personality and disorders that are created over our mental blocks and emotions, and emotionally disturbed child courses. And also, I thought I was going to be a clinical forensic psychologist because I really wanted to understand those darker spaces. And so recognizing through all those formative years about how society does determine our destiny, that I mentioned earlier about the confusion that's created about who we are and what we came here to do, and creating these expectations, even from our parents, the majority and authorities, that kind of create these conditions of what we're meant to do and how we're meant to show up in the world. And it's not the same in every culture in other parts of the world. So being able to travel and experience other ways to live were also very expansive in part of my journey. So when I was going through for my psychology degree and thinking I was going to be a clinical forensic psychologist, I realized that I didn't know how I was going to continue because between my third and fourth year, my father passed away. And that was really devastating for me because he was such a sense of security, I guess. And my parents were very different in the way that they parented me. Mom, I could talk to her during the commercials. And whenever I got super excited about something, you mentioned about my smile. That's like something that I've always had. Is my medicine, I call, is my enthusiasm, right? I just get so excited about everything because I love life. I love soaking it in, like I've been talking about. But it was too much for my mom and she just, was a little overwhelming for her. And I felt like it would burst my bubble all the time. But then I'd go into my dad's room, and no matter what he was doing, he would stop and he would listen. And he would let me share and he would share. And we just created this space together where we can talk to each other. And even though he was a plumber, he was also clairvoyant. So we got into some really interesting spiritual discussions as well. And again, in my early age, I started experiencing death in the family and then continuously throughout those years that I'm talking about between childhood and early 20s, and that more of that continued on that. And what happens beyond death? So we would have a lot of discussions around that. So there was all of these pockets, these pieces that were opening up, my own observations, my schooling, conversations with my dad, different ways of being parented, noticing what dispirits us and also what fuels us, what fuels our energy. And so when my dad died in between that third and fourth year, I wasn't sure how I was going to continue on with my life. So that was a really pivotal moment for me, and a break that I took from university so that I can help out my mom with some things that she didn't learn about, didn't know, because my dad handled a lot of that stuff, right? So I was there for my mom to be able to help her through all of those things. So that break in my studies and my path actually was, again, one of those powerful pivots that helped me reassess the direction I was going in and what I really wanted to do. So then I started studying also that energy work and also the beyond and beyond death. And so getting into like metaphysical studies and different alternative healing modalities, and also the psychology, and also still taking my observations of everything I was learning and how I was going to share that with others. Another pivotal moment in my life was after I had already graduated. I realized that I didn't want to be a clinical forensic psychologist. I was going to work my way up because I just couldn't afford really to go on. And I wasn't really wanting to take on that path. Like I said, things had shifted after my dad died. So instead of going after my PhD, like the original plan, I started working with federal offenders. Then I went into the mental health system. Then I worked with homelessness and addictions, and then worked with domestic violence, and really all the ways that I've been mentioning that we get dispirited and out of order and out of alignment, and move into those darker spaces and start living our life in that darkness rather than in the light. And I kept wanting to find a way of how we can stay in the light, how we can find our rhythm, our authenticity, our natural way of being, and really step into that. And so in that spiritual work, I really came to understand what it meant to be a spiritual being, having this human experience, and ways that we can really kind of master this human experience and master our spirituality by recognizing to be well in this world, we need to focus on our spiritual wellness and the ways that we can keep our spirit intact. And so while I was working in those various professions in social and human services and the areas that I mentioned, there were so many ways that I was serving and giving and being in these roles that allowed me to work with people who were lost in the system and helping them to get out, to provide them with support and resources that would lift them up, to empower them to really come into their own and not be dependent on anyone else that really created a lot of anger and resentment and hostility and despair. And so there was a lot that I've witnessed in all of those years. And in the final 9 years or so of having that type of career, alongside that, I had a healing practice. So I was doing energy work. So that's where the energy work came back in. And it was very freeing to be able to work with people one-to-one outside of any kind of system, rules, and regulations, or ways that I had to work with these people, so that I can really tune into them as an individual, tune into their energy. And in my shamanic work, we did some work around soul retrieval and soul remembrance. Anything that had soul related to it, I really gravitated towards. And that's what I discovered doing all of the other kind of work, is that I felt really constricted and restricted and not able to expand my own evolution and the evolution of others that I was trying to serve. And so I wanted to get out of that role to role way of working with people and work with them more soul to soul. And that's what I got to do in the energy work, and then transformational workshops and courses, and speaking on stages that supported inspired wellness, enlightened wellness. Again, talking about how we can keep our spirit intact and really work up, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs into that pivotal moment of self-actualization, and not get so focused on the deficiency needs. So when I was a helping professional in organizations and agencies, I had to go on stress leave twice due to compassion fatigue, not burnout. Because as a helping professional and health professionals, caregivers would really relate to this as well. Compassionate fatigue is like a secondary trauma. There's detachment in our work, and yet we're holding so much space and being a conduit for people in the way that we serve and care for them, that it takes its own toll emotionally, spiritually, mentally, especially if we're feeling constricted in that work. And so some of my coworkers, actually all of my coworkers, had some form of depression, anxiety, were on medication, were on workers' comp for various reasons, because self-care wasn't enough. I actually heard one of my coworkers state that once. There was one organization we were working in at the time that had ergonomics, that had different workshops, that had a wellness benefit where we could get, wellness workshops or meditation, exercise, and all of those things. And I thought, you know what? She's right. And it was kind of those aha moments. It's like, self-care isn't enough. It works on Maslow's deficiency needs of security and love and belonging, and needing enough exercise and rest and sleep, all the things we don't think we have enough of and need to make a lot of effort to try to get. And we're just continuously spinning our wheels, trying to maintain a balance in that. And I honestly believe balance is more of an illusion. I like to talk more about centeredness and groundedness and coming back into alignment with who you truly are. That's what really helps us feel in balance, right? And creates that. And so that's where my ideas around soul care were born. How we engage in spiritual wellness, how we feed and nourish our souls. And it's not just all of the things that are foundational, like our sleep and our exercise and all of that, and what we're eating for our body. There's so many ways of doing that right or wrong too, right? And again, it just gets overwhelming and confusing and always makes it feel like it's not enough. And so in my work now, I really like people to move beyond the deficiency needs into their growth needs. What helps us evolve? What helps us grow? What helps us move toward self-actualization? And you also talked about, Evelyn, the authenticity. So many people talk about authentic empowerment. And for me, there's also integrity that goes alongside that, because we can be one person with each other right now, or in our business, or in our work, but then we go into our family and it's almost like we're living a double life, because we're not being the same person. We're sharing different traits, different characteristics, depending on who we're with. And that's not authentic. That's not living in integrity if we need to be different things to different people. It's when we can actually be who we are, no matter who we're with, no matter what we're doing. And that's what I found jumping around and take us in this kind of loop around all of these different pivotal moments and different ways of being out in the world. What I discovered in the end was my mission was to guide the destiny of souls into their most empowered way of being. And I was afraid to say that at first, and to really claim that, because I thought it sounded like really grandiose and like I'm some kind of guru or something like that. But then I thought, no, then I started to embody it more. I was like, no, really, this is what I'm here to do. So no matter what role I was in, as a counselor, as a caseworker, in working in corrections, when I was a store clerk, when I was doing any kind of role, that's always what I was doing, was providing space and inspiration and support for people to come into their most empowered way of being, as I was learning to do that for myself too. And, we teach what we need to learn the most. And that soul care became so important because no matter what I was doing, I would overgive. I would overdo and overserve and do so much. And I loved it. It gave me energy. It fueled me. But then when there was a moment where I could rest, I realized I was depleted and exhausted and spent, and so that's not feeding our souls. Our feeding our souls means doing what lights us up, bringing us joy, being out in nature and among animals like we spoke about, knowing what enlivens you, coming back to life again, resuscitating, resourcing ourselves, coming back to source. What gives us life? Breath. There's so much around breath work these days, which is fantastic. Because so many times we don't even realize that we're not breathing, that we're holding back our breath, the basic form of life. And so there's a lot, Evelyn, obviously, that I mentioned that's kind of brought me into this point, was recognizing how I wanted to work, what kind of conditions was going to allow me to be the best version of myself and be able to express myself the most. And I think one more real spiritual awakening, pivotal moment, I had a lot of those, but it was after I had gone through university and was working in my field for several years and then married someone. And marriage was not my agenda. It was not my dream. I was not like a lot of my peers where, they wanted to get married and have a family and do all that. I had no intention of doing that. And yet our souls have a particular path and lessons that we need to learn and go through along the way. And so I ended up on many different initiations, like I mentioned, and rites of passage. And then I ended up in this marriage that was really dysfunctional, that really broke me down and dispirited me. And I didn't like who I had become. And it was that realization that I was like, this isn't going to work for me. This doesn't work for me. And, someone with so much love and compassion to give, I tried that, I held the space for that without trying to change the person. I've always been about never changing anyone, just helping you reveal who you truly are. And it just wasn't working. And then I have a tendency to stay in relationships and jobs or any situation way longer than I need to because I have a much higher tolerance than most people to stay in with something. And I decided that I needed to leave, despite the vows that I took, and I know that's really hard for people too, to break those vows of staying together forever and letting go of that dream of forever and wanting to wait and see, which is the biggest trap ever for no matter what you're doing, to wait and see. That's really anxiety and fear and takes your power away. And so taking back your power means taking your life back, what gives you life, what supports you. And so I decided to do that. And during that time, I was also continuing with my business, and that book that I mentioned that I had started writing when I was 10 and kept adding to and just kind of kept to myself became a journaling style book that ended up being self-published and called Embrace Your Power, a healing journal of self-discovery. So after that marriage, when I left, I landed in this Wise Woman weekend, and I got together with all of these different healing practitioners and energy practitioners and really delved more into that. And I was standing in line at the event. It was a retreat, so it was an overnight. We're standing in the lunch line and overheard someone behind me talking about how to get the issues out of your tissues for good. And, being a counselor at the time, I was feeling kind of ashamed that I was going through this, that I should know better, that I should do better. And then learning to let go of all the ideas of what people think of me or how I should be and allowing that vulnerability. But this idea of getting your tissues out of your issues out of your tissues for good and not having to actually talk about it really felt like the first thing that I needed to do. So I went and did that. And it was a practice called integrated energy therapy. And I loved it so much that I, got my master lessons in that, became an integrated energy therapist and started that work. And that loops back into the healing work. But it was also part of my self-discovery journey and healing the relationship of myself, because I recognized how much I had abandoned myself and my own needs, and really coming back into that. And so this is where I'm at now, like continuously evolving. I'm not doing the energy work anymore. I've brought my focus more from the healing into empowerment. And so now I'm doing, this year was the first Wake Up and Change the World Global Summit, which just lit me up completely, because I got to incorporate so much of my skill set and so much of my passion and desires into this event that I never thought I could do, because I'm not technical at all. It sounded really daunting. And yet I felt this calling to do it. There was a purpose that I needed to put myself out there. And just backtracking one more time to that marriage where it was abusive, there was addiction involved, and my husband did his best. And I don't blame him for anything. It just taught me to take responsibility for my life and made me realize, how not myself I became and then discover who that was again. And part of that was, now I'm just taking myself off on these different tangents too, that, what did I want to say there about that? I don't even know at the moment. Maybe it's not important at this moment. I'm sorry. Just totally lost my train of thought there. Yeah.
You were talking about the summit. The summit. You were talking about
yes, putting myself out there. Thank you. That's exactly what it was. So when I was talking about the abuse and the addiction and all of that, there were death threats on my life as well. And so, as I said, I was doing all this healing work, and, it involves becoming an entrepreneur and putting out this website and being out into the world. And I was afraid to do that for my life, literally, because then my husband would be able to find me. And I was really afraid of that. And yet there was this calling that I didn't need to be afraid, that this is what I was meant to be doing. And so I did. I did put out my website, and more I started showing up, because as I took the next safe step forward, I started to have a new sense of safety and security and trust in the divine timing of everything, that this is what I was meant to be doing. And the same thing happened again years later as I put out the summit this year, that despite all of the things that could have held me back from it, there was also a stronger pull towards doing this. That just to trust that I was going to have everything that I needed. It ended up being absolutely incredible, with over 25 speakers from literally all around the world. We had so many different countries represented. And that was my true passion, is bringing together these spiritual change makers and conscious leaders, because now it's not so much the individual mission anymore. It's this global collective, these soul-centered, purpose-driven entrepreneurs, speakers, authors, messengers that are building up this momentum to create this movement to really wake up and change the world. And that's where I'm at now, is being able to produce this. We're doing the next one at the end of June, and we'll have another one in September, and it'll follow that pattern every March, June, and September. This is going to be happening, and with different topics that are so important and so relevant to today, to be able to bring us to the point of becoming who we came here to be and doing what we came here to do.
What a journey. What a beautiful journey. And you articulated that so brilliantly. I was right there with you through all of it. And I started to have questions, and I didn't want to break the train of listening to you by writing questions down. But I do remember one. I'll go back from in order. When you talked about working back in the clinical space, and you were working with homelessness and people with different afflictions, addictions, etc. Did you feel, with that, I guess, that sleuth hat on that you've always had since the age of 10, did you see patterns in people at that point?
100%. Yes. I always saw people in their highest light, no matter what. And sometimes people would consider that to be a fault because it's not that I was overlooking their fault. I just saw the potentiality, saw their gifts, saw who they truly were. And that comes back to, the parenting, how I felt with my dad versus how I felt with my mom.
Mm.
With my dad, I felt seen, heard, and understood. And I know how important that was and how pivotal and impactful and influential that was to my life, and allowed me to be that for other people, no matter what kind of role I was in.
Wonderful. And when you were, I guess, walking two sides of the line, you were doing the clinical therapy, and then you had your healing business on the side where you could be in the healing at the soul spirit, the soul energy space. Did you wish that you could bring one modality over to the other? So when you were working with these people in the clinical space, it was like, wow, I've got these other tools and I know that I could do that, but I just can't. Did you have this sort of inner conflict or desire to bring them together?
Yes. And I did a whole business plan around soul care in the workplace so that I can go back to those health and helping professionals with these ideas around soul care. And the problem that I had encountered, and this is pre-COVID, because, if you had just listened to me, pre-COVID, and everybody wanted it. All those health and helping professionals really wanted it, and they saw the need for it in themselves and in their employees. However, they're so tight in their schedules. They didn't have time for that. I mean, nurses, for example, don't barely take a break. First responders, they have to go at a drop of a hat. Like, they're always on call. And that's just the reality and nature of those jobs in the health and helping professionals. Helping professionals didn't have the budget for it, right? Because some of them are corporate, many of them were not. And so they didn't have the money to have someone come in and do the energy work or do a talk on that. And so then I thought, well, I need to create the path for this because obviously there's a need for it. So I would help people in my own way. So I started doing it in my home, and those were the people that I served first, were the people that were serving others, and became a healer for healers. And I got more into the shamanic work over the energy work, and did workshops and just worked with the people that I could that were willing to invest in themselves, that were wanting to do that. And so it was a way to bridge that gap.
There might be people listening to this who, maybe struggle with the word spirituality in business. And yet I hear more and more people talk, about this just in general conversation, and even in our business, in our 6-star conversations, in our groups that when we get together. And I'd love you to just sort of talk about what that, how someone might be able to understand that if they're struggling to conceptualize that, as the person that they are, and they've seen spirituality as this thing that's completely separate, or other people do that, not me. That's woo-woo, or that's, do you know what I mean? Like, I'd really like to just kind of break down and dispel that confusion, or the separateness between us and what that really means.
Okay.
Yeah.
So perhaps one way to think about it then, I mentioned about all the different losses that I had in my life, and there were many types of losses, but let's just focus on the ones that were loved ones that had passed on. And so I got to go to a lot of those celebrations of life, funerals and wakes, and hear what people would talk about in regard to that person that had passed on. And it wasn't about what they did per se as a profession, as a business owner, and so on, the successes they had. It was about the relationship, the lessons, the spirit of that person that lives on long after death. And so if you think of spirituality as being that energy, that essence, that spirit of who you are and what you're actually expressing through your business and through the work you do, that's spirituality. It doesn't have to mean, mediums and astrology and all the other woo stuff. And it can, and it does. But a good starting point is to think about us as spiritual beings and freeing your spirit to direct the life that you're meant to live. So one of the things I see, for example, in a 6-star business is not so much about business as a means to an end, like pursuing a goal of having a business. It's following a calling. So that's where spirituality and business get to merge, is that you recognize there's a higher purpose for the business that you have and what you're actually doing. So I'm talking about the impact and influence you have. And the business is just one vehicle of being able to express your spirituality, your spirit of what you're here to come and do. And business is not being so much just about busyness. It's also about fulfillment. And that's also spirituality, is living life to the fullest, whether that means in your business, in your family, with your relationships, with yourself, in your solitude. All of the things is what brings deeper life satisfaction and fulfillment. And that is spirituality.
That's a beautiful description. Wow. Thank you. Thank you. I think, so, we hear of business owners talk about wanting to leave a legacy. Well, effectively, what they're describing, I think, in that is exactly what you just said. That legacy is their spirit lived on and expressed through that business or that community impact or that, fill in the blank, whatever that is.
Yes, exactly. And that legacy, so if I could just add to that, and you could think of it this way too, is really fueling your passion. Okay. And you hear a lot about, passion into your business and passion and profit. And passion, the way I see it, is when you break up this word passion, it's pass I on. And that I is your soul's expression of what you're here to pass on in this lifetime. That's your legacy. That's the influence and the impact. And those are the success markers of a business, not just, meeting certain goals and financial set points that you have for your quarters. It's also about, alongside that, what impact you're having, what influence you're having, the difference you're making with this business, with your life, with your employees, with your coworkers. It's so much more than that.
I can see that. And just, I'm so aligned with what you're saying. I want to also ask a question and give a reference example. How long ago was it? I first heard about this probably 15 years ago, maybe a bit longer. So I was working in a corporate job and I worked very hard and I was quite successful at what I was doing, achieved a lot, and I got burnt out. And not being one to go to doctors, I was told by my mum, who was a nurse, you need to go see a doctor and, get a script to take some time off. And so I did that. And this doctor, who was older, as in he was probably in his, maybe he was 60. He felt like my grandfather kind of thing at the time. And he asked me a bunch of questions and he says, well, honey, it's very clear that you're depressed. You've got some depression. And I was like, what, me? And he wrote me out a medical certificate for 3 weeks off. And there I was thinking, nah, I'll be over this in 3 days. Well, I took that 3 weeks off and I absolutely needed it. But in that time, I did some research and started to look at things. And I came across someone who described depression as a symptom of one not being aligned with their true soul's path.
100%.
And I went, oh, that kind of feels right. But I wasn't in the world space to really have anyone else validate it except for my own inner knowing that might have been correct. And yet it's taken, I mean, from that point to today, you know, obviously I haven't been depressed since, but I've often thought back to that piece of knowledge, that little gift that I got, and I can't remember who said it or what book I read it in or what it was. And I often wonder when I hear of people being depressed, and I wonder, and I go back to that and go, are they on path? Are they tapped into their true purpose? Are they being, you know, or have they lost it? You know, is that what's going on for them? And given that you've worked in this space as a clinical practitioner, as well as, you know, then moving over to the much deeper aspects of, you know, one's soul journey, I'd love you to speak to me about that a little bit, please, because you are the absolute, you know, expert on exactly, I think, what I just said, right?
It's only because I've been through it all myself. Personal and professional growth. I mean, we always need to be continuing that because this is how we grow. This is how we evolve, and we're constantly evolving. But I 100% agree with you. Depression on an energetic level is resistance to life. It takes so much energy to go against life that we're meant to be living. Okay. So that potential you talk about, we're here to actualize our potential. And if we resist that, we do become depressed. It's a repression, a depression of that energy, of that potential. And so that's why I so emphasize spiritual wellness and soul care, so that we don't get to that place, or that we can also prevent overwhelm. You know, that we can create some spaciousness in our life so that when inspiration hits, we can create impact. So we don't put so much pressure on ourselves to meet this version that we're supposed to be or should be or think we need to be, that we can just be who we are and really sink into that, into our heart space. And that's when our heart then expands and radiates the love and the medicine that we're here to give. And medicine, I mean the way that we're here to serve and to help and to be a medicine for someone who needs that healing, that inspiration, that empowerment, not to be an expert, but to be a witness on the journey and to walk the path together. As Ram Dass said in the past, we're all just here walking each other home. You know, and home is where we carry our soul. And if we're not connected to soul or have a conscious connection to a higher purpose or higher reality or even our own higher self, then we don't feel like we belong. We lose our sense of home and what that means.
It's really well described. It's beautiful, really lovely. You mentioned before Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and most of the listeners, I'm sure everyone has heard of them. We understand them.
Yes.
I think I got taught them at university in my studies. And what really started to excite me when you were talking is, you know, I think we're currently in this world of must do. There's like these checklists, and you've got to have the morning routine and the evening routine, and you've got to have this minimum number of hours of sleep, and you've got to, you know, eat this, drink this, you know, all these things. It's like this checklist of the physical wellness, right? And I wonder, is there too much of an emphasis on meeting this criteria that's coming at the expense of actually what we truly need, which is what you started to talk about in terms of soul care rather than the self-care?
Yes, and being surrounded in beauty, the aesthetic needs, right? Being around conditions that soothe our senses rather than overstimulate it. And yes, if we have all of these checklists, it's self-perpetuating. There's always something else to do. That just provokes more anxiety. And it sets us up to thinking that nothing's ever enough. We're never done. We don't have time. We don't have energy. We don't have this. We don't have that, And so, and that's really dispiriting to ourselves, right? And lowers our ability to take responsibility for ourselves, to empower ourselves, to open up the opportunities where we can soothe our senses and be in solitude and actualize our potential and be in the relationships that are life supportive for us, to nurture the ideas that we have and want to develop, and get to those things that we keep putting on the back burner for tomorrow, or the next time. And oh my goodness, we just need a break sometimes, and so imagine what that's doing, Evelyn, to our nervous system. Our nervous system's not set up for the way that we live in today's world, at least not in the Western world. I mean, like I said, when you get to traveling, you realize not everyone's living the way that we think everyone's living. It really opens our eyes up to different ways. A few years ago, I got to travel into different areas in Southeast Asia and Australia, and, especially in Indonesia, every day start with a different kind of morning routine. Okay. We're not going to the gym at 5 a.m. They're sweeping their porch, and have their spirit homes that they're acknowledging the ancestors, everyone who's came before us. They're putting out incense. They're putting out offerings. Our whole life can be an offering. Any of the services we provide can be an offering, just in the way that we think about it, the intention and the energy that we put into it. And so you talk about this to be list. One thing I like to get people to do, and I do myself as well from time to time, so that I can come back into alignment, is alongside that to-do list, have your to-be list. And honestly, if you have 5 minutes right now or after this video or recording, that you write down at least a few things of how you want to be, how you want to be showing up in the world, even getting back into touch with your values. And then cross-referencing that with your to-do list and seeing where it is or isn't in alignment with who you want to be and how you want to be showing up, and with the values that you say that you appreciate and you value. We talked about authenticity and integrity. This is where we get to check in and see if we're actually living up to those things, and what things we can actually take off our to-do list. And the top thing that should be on your to-do list is you. You got to do you, especially if you're a solopreneur, because your business is you. So taking care of your business means also taking care of you.
That's really great advice. I love that. And yeah, the listeners, write down who do you want to be? Like, who am I? Who do I want to be? Is that right? Yeah.
Yes. To
be.
Who are you becoming? Yes. Who are you becoming? Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. You mentioned the quote about from Ram Dass, all of us are walking each other home. I've heard that before, and it's just really lovely. It kind of stops me in my tracks of the busyness. And I have had a reflection, and that is, if I look around society and I look at business, and I've been in this marketing world on the outskirts, but deep in the marketing world, I guess, for 12, 13 years. And I don't like calling myself a marketer because of the way it is. But if I look at marketing as a whole, as an example, it's very polluted with distraction and labels and, desires and expectations, and then you've got all the NLP stuff, but then there's this whole, the fear of missing out and what you're not getting. And I feel like it's for a business owner, you can get really trapped in that. And it just perpetuates this busyness. It perpetuates this need, the belief that you've got to go and do, X, Y, Z on your checklist. You've got to go and present yourself in a certain way, sell yourself a certain way. It's all part of this I think it's anxiety fueled and producing, really. And a lot of business owners are tired of that. And especially the solopreneurs. And they are looking for something different. And there are some, great marketers out there who are more ethical and compassionate, definitely. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this world that we live in. It's like two sides of a coin. It's like a dichotomy, isn't it? On the one hand, there's more people that are waking up to being their true self and bringing their purpose to the world. And the other side of it is still this fast-paced, money-driven, competitive world, right? And how does one balance? Does one, still play in this side, or is there a line to walk down the middle? Is it that there's two parts to us? I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah. And all of those questions are overthinking. They're all overthinking. It's because we're so much in our head trying to figure it all out all the time, right? That we don't even breathe, like we said earlier. We don't get into our heart space. So one way of doing that is to physically put your hands over your heart and really just feel into that and to actually think, not think. And that's what settles you. And then you start to breathe and it starts to slow down. And then you create that spaciousness. And then inspiration comes. And then you start acting from inspiration, so inspired action, rather than the have-tos and the shoulds and all of that BS. And BS is belief system. Like, where are all of those thoughts coming from? What is the source of that? Where does that come from? And tracing that energy back to those original thoughts, that original source of that intention and motivation and idea and belief that that's what we're supposed to be doing. Where does that come from? And so we start transforming those beliefs into more empowering beliefs. And then you can start forming the energy thread the other way into the future. Where are you going? Where is all of this that you're doing here on your list leading you to? So then you start reclaiming that inner visionary, right? And then you start feeling inspired again. You start remembering your why. You start coming back into alignment and feeling that joy. You're coming back to life again, that you create this to call back the dreamer, and if you really want to go after your dreams, the first thing you need to do is wake up. J.M. Power said that. And so waking up, because we become unconscious, we become rote, mundane, just next thing. What's the next thing on our list? Okay, do this, do this, do this. And so it's time to come back into alignment. And that's where we find balance, alignment with your values, alignment with your mission, your guiding principles, allowing your guiding principles to guide you, to help you lead the way, to free your spirit to direct the life that you're meant to live. And that happens through inspired action. Life happens for you, believe it or not. It all starts to unfold by you having this inspired idea, making a decision to take action on that, gaining the momentum, and then birthing it or expressing it out into the world. And we constantly go through that cycle. But sometimes we could just be spinning so fast that we're not enjoying the fruits of our labor as well. We're constantly weaving and not even seeing and appreciating the work we've already done. So taking the time to reflect on that, thinking that, okay, I did enough today. If you did a success log at the end of the day, you'd be absolutely blown away and amazed by how much you actually accomplished. Because our mind is on, oh, I didn't get that done, or I got to still do this, instead of acknowledging, appreciating, rewarding ourselves for what we did do and that we did accomplish. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that because, we can be so critical and, judgmental towards ourselves, right?
100%. Yes, definitely.
I've got to ask you the famous question. What does 6-star mean to you?
Yeah, I think we touched on it in a few different points there. The 6-star is really about that you're following a calling rather than a business plan, right? Your model might be surrounded by or have the integrity of what your values are, what your guiding principles are, and how you are showing up in the world. It's just a vehicle for you to express who you came here to be and do what you came here to do. So it's more about that, and also having influence and impact through your business, not just meeting, the traditional business goals, right? Certain financial measures or certain goals that you might have to grow your company. In a 6-star business, I feel you're also growing your influence and your impact. There's more vision involved. You are a visionary. This is having global impact. So it's not just confined into the walls or parameters of your business. It's looking beyond that. And the bigger picture is like, what is all of this for? And really actualizing your potential and the potential of your business as well. And so really looking, if you have employees, how you're helping them evolve and grow. Do you have a strength-based models where you're bringing together the strengths of all of your employees and bringing those gifts together, which is going to exponentially reveal such impact in your business if you're paying attention to those things? Or are you just giving them a to-do list and having them follow that, and then they don't get to express who they are, which helps you even further express who you are, because there's so much energy and momentum that's created in that, whether you're conscious of that spirituality stuff or not right now, that has such an invisible reach that you're not even aware of, right? It has such a ripple effect that goes out into our next lifetime even, right? Because our soul has now evolved into, this is what we're here for, to evolve our souls into the next thing, the next lifetime, if we're needing to go through that, or maybe we'll master it in this lifetime. Who knows? Things are accelerating so much these days, but that's what I see it. I see it as having a higher vision, a higher purpose, and greater impact.
I'm not sure if you know this, or you've heard me say this in other episodes, but we have 3 kind of foundational tenets upon which the 6-star business is based, and it's purpose, love, and impact.
Oh, I love it. Yes. And love, I love this acronym for love, which is lots of vital energy.
Yeah.
And that's what people get to experience through your expression of love. And soul is also an acronym for sending out universal love. So if you take a soul-centered approach, like having these guiding principles that you just mentioned for a 6-star business, then that's sending out that universal love and really keeps all of those principles intact that you just mentioned. So that is amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Thank you for who you are and the work that you're doing.
Oh, you're so welcome. I've got just a final kind of question, as I realize we've kind of gone over a little bit.
Okay.
I didn't even realize the time. My gosh. Where does someone start? So someone's listening to this right now, and they're fully, on it with everything that you've said, and they're like, wow, I'm clearly not tapped into my soul's purpose or my true inner being. What do you recommend that they do as a first step?
That's a perfect first step, is that realization, and then a willingness to tap in and get in touch with their soul. And that's tuning back into your natural rhythms. And one way to do that is you need to break the pattern, break the, the go, 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 go. So taking that sacred pause. Yeah. Taking that sacred pause. I mean, when I was in that kind of mode, in that gear, that couple minutes we get to spend in the bathroom and shut the door is such a relief sometimes. So sometimes that's literally what we need to do. And I find it fascinating that in some places we call it a restroom. I'm like, oh, that's kind of cool, actually. Some people call it a bathroom or a washroom, but when you call it a restroom, it's like, yeah, you kind of take that moment of rest. But I'm just using that as an analogy that just take a couple minutes more if you can and just kind of shut the door for a minute or more and just pause. Just stop. Just come back to your senses, soothing your senses, a moment of quiet. Sometimes you can help that with putting your hands over your heart and feeling into your heart, coming back to your breath, because that is your natural rhythm, just noticing how you're breathing. Not that you have to do anything. I know there's a lot of breathwork practitioners and there's a lot of value for the work that they do, of course, but to start, just noticing your breath, noticing what you see when you step out the door, not thinking about, oh, I forgot my keys. You step out the door and you notice what you notice. If there's an animal going by, a truck going by, a leaf that's blowing in the wind, start using your senses and coming back to your senses. So noticing what you smell, what you see, what you taste, what you're feeling, what you experience. I mean, when I was working with people in trauma, that was when they were experiencing flashbacks or in that crisis mode. To get them back is to feel your feet on the ground. Notice your feet in the ground, have that breath, notice a few things that you're seeing, smelling, tasting. That's coming back to our natural rhythms, our natural senses, our true reality, so that we can sink back into our heart. Having a morning routine is that most important, because then you get a chance to put yourself first before anything else. So even starting with some guiding principles, affirmations, something inspirational, sipping your cup of coffee, tea, whatever it might be, you can actually even imagine your cup being whatever you need for that day. So if you need more peace, if you need more joy, if you need more energy, whatever you need it to be, put it in your cup. And as you're sipping whatever beverage you've chosen, imagine that you're filling your cup, your vessel of life, your body temple, filling that up with whatever you need, and just acknowledging what brings you joy. So if you love making lists, then make that to-be list. Make a list of all the things you love and that you enjoy, and choose one thing that day or that week that you're going to do to bring that joy into your life. Because once, like I said, we have an idea of what we might like to do, we make that decision, then we start gaining momentum around it. And then we want to do it more and more and more because we love the feeling of that. So we're not just motivated by the adrenaline rush anymore. We're motivated because of the love and the joy that we get to experience when we're doing the things that light us up, or surrounding ourselves with the people that we love. For me, it's more being myself, just having my retreat time, having quiet time, and being in solitude. So be okay with that. If you want some time for yourself, it's not selfish. It's actually responsible, taking responsibility for yourself, your soul care.
What a brilliant
so a few
answer.
Ideas.
Wow. Just a few. That was amazing. That was just gold. Thank you. Wow.
Hopefully that didn't overwhelm everyone, but
no, I was completely enthralled. I was like, oh, I've got to take myself off mute and answer. I was right in there. Jennifer, thank you. Do you have any final tidbit or little passing piece of wisdom that you'd like to leave our listeners with?
It's really my motto, I guess, is what I'd like to share again, is that free your spirit to direct the life that you're meant to live. So just follow your spirit, your energy, where that wants to take you.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing and being here with me today. I so appreciated everything that you've done, and I look forward to connecting again with you very soon. And I know that our listeners would have gotten a lot from this conversation. Thank you so much for what you do. So important.
Thank you. Thank you to you and everyone that's out in the audience today.
Thanks, Jennifer.